Hi, so it's Jeremy Long, and this is my case study for the missing booster club funds for EDL 854. Well, the first thing that we're asked to do is go through the problem identification and analysis, and when it comes down to that, what do I know? So here are some facts, a little bit of background information. First off, George Washington is a very small school for compared to other schools in its region. The socioeconomic level of families has decreased over the years. It's really a blue-collar area. The principal, Mr. Stevens, we know that he is well liked, and he also, because of his being shorthanded, he places, well, not just because he's shorthanded, but he is one that places a lot of trust in volunteers. As we know as principals, volunteers are going to be a key aspect of our school. We need them, so it's good to place trust in them. And parent volunteers, we know, are committed to the school. And those are some good things about George Washington, a little bit of background information. And then we move into a little bit about the issue that's before us. So Mrs. Bowman, she wanted the PTA to sponsor her daughter's cheer trip, and Mr. Stevens denied the request, and there was evidently a little bit of an issue between the two, or at least she really pressed for him to pay for the trip, and he very clearly stated that he was not able to use funds that were raised by all students to benefit just one, and that's, straight out of Mutter and Parker, our text when it comes to school finance, so it's a good reference. And she that night was involved with the taking of money and tickets at the game, and she was also the one who handed Mr. Stevens the bank bag. The principal then discovered that funds were missing after the game, and we're going to get into the specifics of that in a little bit, but $50 is what is missing actually from the total proceeds plus the change fund balance. So even though the ticket numbers sold and the proceeds balanced, my understanding is that the total funds in the bank bag, including the change fund, did not balance. It was short by $50. Now, Mrs. Bowman wrote the note regarding the torn tickets, and there's currently no physical proof of these torn tickets that we know of, and we also know that Mr. Stevens witnessed a $50 bill, or he heard from a patron that he paid with a $50 bill. So the $50 bill is not in there. Now that doesn't mean that there could not have been another customer or another patron who paid with a $100 bill and they had to cash out the change. That's a possibility. However, we do know that $50 is missing. So there's some things that we need to know. First, as a principal, I'd need to know the school policies and procedures related to the event. So what are some written guidelines that are available for our school regarding the admission tickets, change funds, and how those are dealt with? We know from Mutter and Parker that a two-person team is a good idea, and it sounds like that was used. However, evidently, two people were not used or inside of the bank bag at all times because Mrs. Bowman personally delivered the bank bag to Mr. Stevens. Now, who was directly involved? So we know that there were multiple volunteers that night, 2 for the concession stand, 2 for the ticket taking. How many ticket sale locations were there? Was there one where Mrs. Bowman and the other volunteer were working together as a team, or were there 2 separate places where a person was taking tickets and money? Also, was the final report completed by 2 people, or was Mrs. Bowman the only one to complete the report? And of course, we know the importance of final reports from referencing Mutter and Parker. Now, a couple other things. The specifics regarding the interactions of the volunteers that evening. So I kind of talked about that briefly before. Were they working together at all times? And can someone else besides Mrs. Bowman confirm the existence of the torn tickets, or is she the only one? Was there an event coordinator that night, as there should have been? That's another thing that I'd like to know as an administrator. All right, so identifying the problem. It's pretty clear that school funds are missing, and that's a big issue. Now, we do know that $50, while it's not a huge amount, it's still an issue, and we're going to take it seriously. Now, the person that is responsible for the missing money is not necessarily known. However, there's fairly solid motive connected to Mrs. Bowman, and she also had the bank bag in her possession at a time where I'm going to assume no one else was monitoring her. Mr. Stevens takes the bank bag and counts the money in front of a security guard, but did that happen with Mrs. Bowman? And it seems like probably it didn't. Now, so in that case, policies were likely not being followed, which is another issue. Our administrator was short-handed and did not have time to supervise, or he was not able to supervise the taking of tickets and the money. And so in this case, there is a pretty good chance that the trust of school volunteers is going to be diminished. All right, so I put together a plan of action. We're going to want to make sure that we gather resources and make necessary contacts. First of all, as the principal, I would double check all these reports if there were reports, and double check the cash fund and balance to make sure that I'm not making a mistake. But I'm going to assume that Mr. Stevens had done that. Now, contact district superintendent to inform of the issue. That's going to be important. Inform upper leadership of the problem so that we can figure out the best steps moving forward. We're going to review our board policies related to the event, see where we are at with those, and we'll also then when we get into the real action, we're going to need to schedule an individual meeting with each parent volunteer. So to talk about that a little bit, the volunteer meetings with parents. Assure each individual that it's only an inquiry. The district appreciates their volunteerism. We're just trying to figure out a little bit about what happened at the ball game. I'm going to determine who was responsible for each task that night. We're going to obtain some perspective about the ticket taking and proceed reporting process from their point of view and learn who completed this ticket sales report. I'm going to assume that it was signed, but other policies were not being followed, so we don't know that for sure. And can someone also prove that there were torn tickets other than Mrs. Bowman claiming this? Now, we're going to also need to meet with Mrs. Bowman, and I would involve the superintendent in the meeting because first off, the principal and her have already had a little bit of an issue before, so we think, and this approach is going to depend a little bit on the information that we've gained from the volunteers beforehand. So we're going to use language such as, the ticket sales report and the final total cash from the ball game did not balance, and we're working to resolve the issue. We want to ask her for more information regarding the torn tickets. We're going to ask her if she remembers a $50 bill. These are all things to get into, and we don't know exactly how she's going to respond to this questioning, so a little bit of the course of action is going to depend on that. Maybe she's going to come right out and admit to it. We don't know, but maybe she's going to deny it. As I go through this strategies for implementation, I borrowed some of this from my course on school law from our text because I thought it was quite applicable, and so I will observe procedural due process in discovering the individuals responsible. We cannot jump to conclusions. Yes, Miss Bowman had the bank bag, but we don't have proof that she stole the money. However, we have a pretty good idea that she did, but we're going to have to be careful as we don't want to make substantiated claims. Now, I'm going to seek some legal counsel or advice on the school's options regarding disciplinary measures. This is not a major crime. She stole $50 from the school, if she did. However, we need to be, consider our options and what we're going to do as an administration. And I'm going to make appropriate contact as well with the parent organization. Going through this, I'm not going to make accusations. Steps for the resolution: I want to get the responsible person to admit to the theft, and I want to work with the PTA and Booster Club to develop a time-based plans for preventing further issues, because really, obviously, the lack of procedure or following of policy is why this was able to happen. So we're going to improve the environment for learning and reduce unnecessary stress because of this. And we're going to implement a required training session for volunteers that will handle school funds moving forward. And I think that comes right out of Mutter and Parker. Okay, our plan of action is designed to benefit students. And I can prove that because here's the thing: if we aren't careful about what we do, a chain reaction of events with strong feelings of resentment could occur. And so by preventing that, students will benefit because their funds will be protected and we won't have further issues. Students and their families could also lose trust in a school if I'm the principal and I quickly start blaming a volunteer for something. And I want to observe proper procedures and adhere to local law, state law when it comes to maintaining a safe, and this will maintain a safe environment for learning. Okay, my thoughts on the issues. So Mr. Stevens is obviously in a difficult spot. There's a good chance that Mrs. Bowman will not be cooperative, but we don't know this. There was too much trust placed on the volunteers. However, we know in small schools we don't have enough people, and so we do know that Mr. Stevens did follow proper procedures to discover the theft because he did discover it. And the PTA and Booster Club should be valued and trusted, and we need to remember that as we move forward. Continuing with this, my feelings, I'm concerned there will be difficulty in dealing with the parents. And I'm also worried about my plan of action if Mrs. Bowman completely denies the theft. And I'm worried a little bit about negative public relations when it comes down to it. We're trying to protect funds, and it could kind of bring a bad name to our school. Things to value here. School policies and laws are in place to deal with the issue, so that's good. As an administrator, I'm going to follow them. The amount is $50, which is a fairly small amount, as I mentioned before. However, it's still serious. And we do want to hold on tight to the fact that parents are active in our community and they're willing to volunteer. Now there's some unresolved issues. Slight possibility that this is just all a misunderstanding. Yeah, however, I doubt it, but it could be. Is this an isolated incident? There may be other occurrences of theft. However, it does seem that Mr. Stevens has been good at taking proper procedure and making sure that funds are there. Implementation of trainings and stricter adherence to policy could cause some issues and ongoing legal ramifications. You know, if we back to the implementation of trainings, there might be some parents who don't have time to attend, and so they won't be able to volunteer anymore. I want to promote the student success through managing the situation in an appropriate and timely manner. I'm going to review policy and collaborate with others. I'm going to uphold school policy to maintain a safe environment for learning. That's going to be good for management. And I want to implement the plan for preventing another occurrence, and that's good, proper management. The next is social learning. I want to ensure that solid evidence is gathered, which I think we have fairly solid evidence, but we have to be careful with Mrs. Bowman. We're going to give proper consequences, and we're going to meet with the PTA and Booster Club to maintain positive relationships. And by doing this, we'll set the example to our students and to our community that we are following through with the issue. Academic learning, we're going to protect our school resources to promote academics. We're going to ensure that due process is followed because there are going to be people watching. We're going to also, like I've said before, continue to support that PTA and Booster Club, because without them, we're not going to have a very good culture. They're our parents. They set the tone for what our kids are bringing, the attitude our kids are bringing to school. Now we can affect that as teachers and as administrators, but it might be difficult. So that's the end of my presentation. I used Essex and Mutter and Parker as references, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.